And battles are never won alone. They are won together. Because together is stronger. Tied tight, united we stand. In honor of one child's wish. And inspired by the fire in his fight. Join the kingdom.
Hey everyone, my name's Ryland and welcome to the first official episode of the KingJay podcast. Now in today's episode, I'm going to be going over who my brother was as a person, the relationship between him and I, leading up to his diagnosis, as well as the beginning of the whole experience for myself. Now, before we jump into it, I thought I'd just like to mention the new Q&A portion that we'll be adding into the podcast. So essentially, you guys can go ahead on Instagram, Facebook, or even the YouTube comment section, and you can ask any question you have revolving around the KingJay story, who he was as a person, or even any questions that you have for myself. We'll be choosing one question a week on which we feel is the most appropriate for where we are in the podcast, and just go from there. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask, and we might be choosing yours for the upcoming episode. So with that being said, this week's question comes from Elijah Grant. His question was, who is Jay as a person? Which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today at the beginning. So, to start it off, who he was one of the funniest people I knew. I think April Fool's Day was one of his favorite days of the year. He wasn't the loudest, with that being said, but he loved to pull pranks on people. He loved, April Fool's Day, getting that almost a freebie to pull pranks on people all day. He was extremely athletic, played basketball, of course, hockey, soccer, and even football in high school. I think he won something like 5 championships in the span of 6 years in hockey, which is just stupid on how much he was able to consistently win in every sport all the time. So that was something that he'd always like to bug me about, because I've never been able to reach up or keep up with him in that aspect. So, he was the big brother in the family, of course, being the oldest, but I think he almost took it to the extra level, not verbally, but more so through actions. I think he felt almost a responsibility in raising myself and my younger siblings, especially once he was diagnosed. I think he felt that even more, and, that was kind of a time where he shouldn't have to worry about anything like that, but he still just kind of kept on going with it, and never changed his ways that way. He was never one to complain ever, no matter what it was. Thinking back throughout all the years, besides being, of course, when you're super young and you fall and scrape your knee or something dumb like that, but he was never one to complain about pain, or he'd always just kind of suck it up and keep pushing through. And I think he's kind of instilled that in myself and my younger siblings, just being that role model for us. And then, as for the relationship between him and I, it was always super competitive between each other. Being the older brother, I always had to try and beat him, but I always had to try and prove that I was better than him, but I was never able to, no matter what it was, whether sports or, video games, whatever it may be back then. I remember going outside to play street hockey with our neighbors, Trey and Tage, all the time. Trey was the same age as him, and Tage is the same as me, so we'd always go out and be playing street hockey or capture the flag. And I remember throughout all the years that we were neighbors in street hockey, we were never able to, it'd always be the youngest against the oldest too. So me and Tage, we only beat them once only one time that I can remember throughout all the years. And I remember we were just celebrating like we just won the Stanley Cup, or I remember it was one of the funniest things ever looking back on it now, because we were finally able to beat them in something, and because they would just kill us every game, every day. But, even as we got older, we kept that competitive edge with each other, even when we we'd go down different paths almost with sports. You know, he started to go towards basketball more, and I went more towards hockey and baseball. We'd always kind of translate or intertwine the sports to still kind of be competitive with each other on how we did personally in our separate sports, even though it's really hard to compare, you know, always bugging each other and stuff like that. As well as, I think if you're looking at us from an outsider's perspective, even my parents' perspective, I don't think you would have thought that we were as close as we truly were. But once you got us just alone, just the two of us, it was almost like you flipped a switch or something. You know, of course we were close normally, but I think once you got us just the two of us, we were much closer, and he was truly my best friend. Now, as for leading up to his diagnosis, the first time it ever hit me that something wasn't right, he started experiencing some pains, and he was never one to complain, like I said before. So this would have been in the fall of 2015. I came home from school and from junior high, so I would have been grade 8 and he would have been grade 11. I come home from school and walk into the garage, and I can hear him screaming in pain from the garage while he was in his basement room. And like I said, he was never one to complain, so I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't know how to go about it. It was never something I really experienced with him, so I just kind of kept going. I wasn't sure if I should have checked on him or anything like that, but so I just kind of went to my room and waited for my parents to come home because no one else was home then, and I was just sitting there just hearing him scream in pain over and over and over. And hearing him in pain like that, it was something, like I said, I've never heard him in pain like that. Or so of course I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but I remember my dad telling me that what the nurses, like the home nurses, would come by to try and figure out what it was. And like my dad told me, the nurses thought it was, I can't remember the term for it, but it's when a ball of sweat builds up, and they say it's common in athletes. It's something I've never heard of before, and I guess they just gotta kind of cut it open and take it out. But you know, still to this day, it's something I've never heard of. But you know, obviously that wasn't it. So I guess, as my dad told me as well, they were, you know, my brother just had an instinct from the beginning that he had cancer. He said to my dad, you know, I have cancer, but before him even being diagnosed. But as a parent, you don't want to believe it. You never want to believe something like that before even being told that. So of course, you know, my dad didn't believe him and just kind of kept trying to figure out what it may be. But then on November 17th, 2015, he was diagnosed with cancer. They didn't know what it was right away, but I remember my dad coming home, and I was sitting on the couch watching Sportsnet, which was, I'd watch that like there's no tomorrow back then. And my dad comes home and asks us to sit at the table. So we go and sit at the table, and my mom's starting to cry, and you obviously know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. And then my dad just broke it to myself and my siblings, just straight up. He just said, you know, Jay has cancer, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we cure it. But it was just, you know, the little details in a moment like that, I feel like you rather don't remember anything except for that, or you remember everything. And for me, it was one of those moments where I remember every detail about it. You know, it was pitch black outside, and I remember my little brother was wearing a red shirt, and I remember exactly where we were all sitting at the table. And it's kind of weird to think about all the little details that you pick up in a moment like that, but when you think about it too, it's not surprising how you're just being able to pick up all those details in such a forever life-changing moment. So, you know, moving forward from there, as soon as, you know, we kind of finished talking about it, and I just went straight to my room. You know, I was 13 at the time, so I didn't know, I never experienced anything like this before. I didn't know how to go about it. So, typical young teen, I go and grab my phone and I texted probably 10, 15 people. I don't think it was, looking back on it now, I don't think, without a doubt, it wasn't for attention. I think it was more so I just didn't know how to go about it. I was looking for kind of some instant guidance on how to go about it, even though, I was texting some people who were my friends, some people I talked to twice in my life who I just happened to have their phone number. And it's, because of who my brother was, he didn't want anyone to know right away. He just kind of wanted to keep it on the low and just kind of continue going about, normal life, except for, of course, now the fact that he has cancer, so he just kind of wanted to battle through it and keep going on about life. And I remember when he found out that I told a bunch of people, he came in my room and he just ripped me apart. He wasn't happy, just, of course, with who he was, totally deserved it. Don't want to take anything away from that. But it's not something that I regret. I don't think that you can regret anything in life, because from my point of view, at least, no matter how much you think that you messed up in the moment, even if you didn't think it through, especially a moment like that where, I didn't know what to do in that situation. I've never been there before. So for me, I just don't think I can regret a moment like that. I just was looking for some guidance instantly, and all you can do is, take a mistake and learn from it, move forward with it, and keep going. So, the next day at school, I remember walking through the doors and a group of my buddies being there and all just kind of telling me that they're there for me, anything I need. And so that was kind of a moment that, I'm really grateful for. I really appreciate it. And, it's once again one of those moments where you just kind of remember it right away and you remember every detail in it. And it's something that, even though I think the first few moments for sure, in a situation like this, you without a doubt remember the most of it and even the little details, but just because of how much of a life-changing situation you're now in, however you want to say it. But it was, having those friends there for me, it was really great to have them there for support. And then, not too long later, on November 26, 2015, of course, the same year, just a week and a bit later, they found out what type of cancer he had, which was stage 4 rhabdomyosarcoma, which is cancer of the muscle tissue. So it's, of course, stage 4, it's the worst type of cancer you can be diagnosed with. But, once again, with who my brother was, he didn't want us to know, myself and my siblings, how bad the cancer was. He just wanted to keep going, battling through, himself. He didn't want to put us in a difficult situation, especially when you're so young like that. For him, I think it was, if it comes to a point where, we're going to have to know, which, sadly ended up happening later on. But, for the first year, for sure, myself and my siblings, we were, I wouldn't want to say kept out of it, but more so, I'd say he more wanted to just protect us for as long as he could before, we had to really get involved. So, like one story, this was a story, as soon as I thought of the podcast, I for sure had to share. So my first year Bantam in hockey, I originally actually got cut from the team, but they realized that they cut one too many D. So I got put back on the team, and it was the first game after my brother got diagnosed, and we were up by 1 goal against the other St. Albert team, and being a bottom end D, especially at the beginning of the year, without having, much opportunity to prove yourself, or I was, wasn't expecting to go out in a situation like that. And then, 45 seconds left in the game, I get tapped on the shoulder and told to go out there by my coach. So, up by 1, you're just trying to do everything to make sure that you win the game, and I remember a puck gets dumped in, and so I go back for the puck, and one of my now buddies, Matt Reedy, just comes right up on me, and I lost the puck in my feet right behind the net, and he just kills me into the boards and passes it out front. And as soon as I kind of turn around, I look and see the puck get shot in the net, and it was at this moment when it truly hit me that, like, that was the moment when it hit me that my brother has cancer. It was, once again, one of those moments you won't forget. For me, it's, a little bit humorous in a way, of course not in the part where, that it hit me that my brother has cancer, but more just the hockey side of it. But, I remember just sitting there, or as soon as I got up, I just was so mad at myself, just thinking, I couldn't even make a simple play right at the end of the game to get the puck out. And, my brother now has cancer, and he's fighting, but, it's something that you can't change. You just got to learn from it and move forward. And, I was sitting in the dressing room after the game, and I just didn't want to leave. I just kept thinking, over and over and over again about how my brother has cancer. And finally, I'd say about 20 minutes later, some guys are already out of the room heading home, and my coach calls me out, and I was expecting to just get torn apart for what I did but as soon as he calls me out, he doesn't even bring up the play once. He just asked me how my brother's doing, asked me how I'm doing and my family as well. We just talked about the new life situation that we're in, however you want to say it, and didn't bring up the hockey side once. He just kind of told me to, not worry about it, just kind of get better from it, move on from it, and focus on what's more important right now. And it was one of those moments that I was truly grateful for, being able to have a coach like that who just wants the best for you, I was extremely shocked when he didn't bring it up once, didn't get mad, because I was expecting to, get ripped on. But, just having that coach there for support, it was a moment that I'm really grateful for. And I think even for my parents, something that they're extremely grateful for as well. Even my team throughout that whole year, the team came by for a trip to the hospital to come visit my brother, and just to give him a fresh look, something new, something different, see some new faces around. And so that year, the whole hockey team, extremely supportive of our situation and where we were. And even very end of the year when we got knocked out of playoffs, we were all in our little huddle near the net after we got knocked out, whatever you want to call it, and all the coaches come in, and our head coach, Jeff Lair, same guy who talked to me in the hallway, he just said, Jay's up in the stands there, go give him a salute. And it just kind of hit me that, like, this coach is more worried about my brother being here and us supported him after we just got knocked out of playoffs. It's not something that you see in a ton of coaches, but, of course there's other amazing coaches out there too. But that was just another one of those moments that I was extremely grateful for. And, is a moment that kind of meant a lot to me, even though, it sucked. We just got knocked out of playoffs. So as soon as we get out, my brother starts making fun of me for losing again. But, it was just a moment that I'm really grateful for, even up till today. Now, like I said, the whole first bit of it for me, about the first year, myself and my siblings, we weren't involved a ton. My brother wanted to protect us, so it was a little tough to, people would ask questions on, how's he doing, what type of cancer does he have, and I honestly didn't know at first. I didn't know probably about till the end, near the end of the school year, how he has rhabdomyosarcoma. My parents or him, they didn't tell me what stage it was at, because he wanted to protect us, but kind of a moment that I really respect him for, looking back on it now, but also something I wish I knew, because for me personally, I didn't know, having to go through that for the first time. It was something that I'd never experienced before, of course, like I said before, and it was almost an uncomfortable situation for me at first. I didn't know how to go about it. So, there'd be some days where I wouldn't really interact with him a whole lot. I don't know. I think it was more I didn't want to make him uncomfortable more so. And so I think the one piece of advice that I'd like to give for you guys, for anyone who may be going through similar situations, just make sure, no matter how hard it is for yourself, it's 3 times, 4 times harder for whoever it is battling through cancer, whether it's a sibling, parents, friend, whatever it may be. Just, although it's hard for you, it's just as hard, even harder for them. They got to battle through it, as well as, have to be in the same situation as yourself, almost just on the other side. So just make sure that you offer your support and make sure that you're there for them in the end. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. So thank you very much for tuning into this first episode on the KingJay podcast, and I hope you guys tune in next week. Thank you. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode on the KingJay podcast. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share with all your friends and family, as our goal is to grow this as big as possible, so we're able to reach this podcast to as many people as possible who are potentially looking for some guidance through a tough time in their lives, and be able to help fund future wishes for other kids in need, and just be able to make as big of an impact as possible. Thank you.
Join the kingdom.